Why are European politicians such liars? Liar, liar, pants on fire. And why do they get away with it? That's a really interesting question, maybe the most basic question that we ignore and keep moving. So let's not ignore the question. Let's talk about it. We brought in Ralph Schoelhammer. He's a political analyst and a European to discuss this. So simple question, but let's get to it, because why are they such liars and why are we used to it?
I think one of the main reasons is because the media allows them to get away with them, right? You surely recall there was always this idea that the media, they speak truth to power and they will kind of stand up to the dark machinations of politicians. But that is no longer the case. And we can go over all the major problems of the last couple of years, from COVID to the war in Ukraine, to inflation, to migration. So whatever it is, the threat to democracy, maybe something we also have to talk about in greater detail. All the things that are going on, right? Pretty much in every one of these areas, we are being lied to. And for a long time, your viewers know this, right? For a very long time, I always said, I think it's more incompetence than malice. And I always assumed that it's simply people that don't know what they're doing. And it looks like a kind of a conspiracy. But I'm gradually coming to the conclusion there is more to the idea that this is concerted than I thought in previous times. And the main culprit, I have to admit, for me, is the media in this. I'm sure we all remember during Donald Trump, when I think it was the Washington Post or the New York Times, when they had Donald Trump's lie counter, where they, you had like CNN, a panel, and they said it's day, 25 of the Trump administration, and he has told 165 lies so far, including, when he said there were 10 million people at his inauguration. Of course, there were not 10 million people. I mean, it's Donald Trump. We all know that he embellishes. So when he says he's the richest man who's ever lived, like everybody knew when there was exaggeration, embellishment, and when he was serious. But they just thought that everything he says was supposed to be a lie. Now, as soon as he was out of office and other people came into office, this completely disappeared. And apparently the expectation was that now it's absolutely acceptable to say the untruth again. And
So
really,
you're saying that there's like a juxtaposition, like Trump, they need him to be the ultimate liar, so they can't point out other obvious liars. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, but I think it's even worse than that. I honestly believe that within the main media outlets, that they're either terrified or you name it, they're so afraid of that their power position can be broken, that they can no longer be the gatekeepers of information, that there are actually new movements and new media like Redacted, right, like Redacted coming up, that they lie because they think it's for a good cause. Because they must know, for example, take the European case, they must know Ursula von der Leyen is a politician in deep trouble. She is on the one hand incompetent, and there are serious allegations that she's probably corrupt as well. Any other politician of a center right-wing party that would behave like Ursula von der Leyen, like the media would have one headline after another about this, but nothing is happening. You see the same with Joe Biden. I mean, some of these things are just funny. What his uncle was eaten by cannibals, and when he was, his father told him in 1950 when they saw two men kissing on the street that this is what true love is. I'm not in America, but I'm pretty sure that no gay couples kissed in public in 1950. So or when he tells these stories about that his son died in Iraq, it's tragic that his son died, but he did not die in Iraq. But that's simply an untruth. So it's all these things, but we are supposed to accept it because the game they're playing.
Just today, actually, the Daily Caller published an average of how many times Joe Biden has lied just this year alone, and it was 1.3, but they're calling them gaffes. Not necessarily lies. It's a gaffe because he doesn't know any better. He just misspoke. You see how even that is a trick of the hand.
But it's even worse. So they're basically saying, oh, no, he's not a liar. He's just an idiot. Honestly, I don't know how that is any better. And I mean, again, I don't mean any disrespect to the president, but I mean, this is basically the argument, as you correctly said. So they are basically saying, he's not lying. He just doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, I'm not entirely sure how that should give anybody any kind of confidence. But you see it in other areas as well, right? We talked a lot on your show about Germany. We have now this huge report coming out that basically the German government lied to the people when it came to the issue of nuclear power. They said they cannot continue to run them, that they need to be turned off. Now we know that that was a blatant lie. We know that they lied about immigration, right? They said, oh, there are no problems with migration. It's just a few bad apples. Most of these people come here and they want to integrate and live like us. And now you have over 3,000 people demonstrating in Hamburg and demanding that Germany introduces the caliphate and Sharia law. So in all these areas, as I said, like we are being gaslit in the best case or lied to in the worst case. And it bothers me that the media plays, and I cannot stress this enough, that the media plays along with this. We are supposed to accept it because they are justifying their current lies with another lie, which is that because they're all fascists, they're all Nazis, they're all a threat to democracy. Just recently, the German head of the Social Democrats, right, she went on public TV and said the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, is a Nazi party. Now, whatever you think of the AfD, they're not a Nazi party. There are many things, but they're not a Nazi. It's a lie, right? It's a blatant lie. But you make this because then you can justify what they're trying to do, which is to ideally ban them before the next elections. So they use the lie that they are Nazis and a threat to democracy to ban the most significant opposition party, which I would argue is the one true attack on democracy. Because what is democracy if not having different political parties with opposing views? But they want to ban them. The same in the United States. Everybody of your viewers who lives in the United States knows that most of these court cases against Donald Trump are a sham, right? I mean, they're a joke. The hush money trial is a joke. The idea that if a politician pays a woman off to conceal an extramarital affair, I mean, it's not something that I condone generally from a moral perspective, but the idea that this is a campaign finance violation, I mean, this is all ridiculous. These are attempts to keep the opposition off the ballot. And it is frustrating that so many people play along with it.
But in Europe, it's even more insidious because I think most people understand the media is complicit with lies.
Yes.
They're just awful. In Europe, just as bad as in the United States. But now politicians want to regulate speech, and they even are giving themselves power inside Europe as far as your text messages. They think that they should be able to control the message, even person to person, not just the media. The media they've got on lock in Europe. To me, it's about as shameful as it can be here in Europe. But now they're going to go even further so that you and I cannot think this together. Why are we standing for this?
I have to admit, this is a big problem, right? It's because for many people, this is unfortunately also an issue. You and I, we are, politics junkies. Kind of, we do nothing but talk and engage with politics. But many people, that's not their own fault. They just rely on the mainstream and legacy media because this is what they get used to. So we have a kind of brainwashing going on that takes place almost on an unconscious level because it's much, much more difficult, particularly also for the older generation, but others on the younger generation as well, to get access to what is very often called in a negative way, but I'd see it as a positive thing, the so-called alternative media. So this is really going to be a battle. And they, as you exactly just pointed out, and they try, the legacy media and their, kind of political allies, they try to regain their role of gatekeepers of information. And it's all these weird terms they use: hate speech, disinformation, misinformation, or my all-time favorite is the so-called malinformation, which is defined as information that is objectively true, but could be used in a negative way. So for example, if you and I say, we have a problem with migration, then they might say, yes, this is objectively true. But the way in which Natali and Ralph say it, that could be hateful, that could be hurtful to some people. So better not let them say it. The same we see when you look at the war in Ukraine, right? Everybody who says, man, it looks like things on the front are not looking as good as they told us a year ago, then you are a Putin stooge. Then you're a mouthpiece of Putin, even though it is objectively correct. I mean, even the Ukrainians themselves admit that the war is not going as they were hoping it was going. And Corona, right? The COVID vaccinations, the same thing. Now, more and more evidence is coming out, completely understandable, that there is not a single medical procedure that has a 100% success rate and has a 100% zero side effect rate. So the truth is now coming out. But once again, the step is, it might be objectively true, but we shouldn't talk about it because it's denying of science. Climate change, the same thing, right? We kind of know now, if you go back to newspaper articles 20, 25 years ago, what's all going to happen. New York will be underwater. Real estate is going to collapse in Miami because half the city will be underwater. And of course, now people justifiably so say, well, you told us 25 years ago the world is going to end in 20 years. We are now 5 years over the expiration date of the planet. But I mean, if we look around, we're all still here. And in many ways, if you look at Florida, we're doing better than we did before. So people are skeptical. So next step is, well, we have to ban those skeptical opinions. So this is really one of the major battles we have to fight in the future, because it will be very hard to have an open political process if the debate can no longer take place. And allow me one final point. I always disagreed with Donald Trump when he said that the 2020 election was stolen, in the sense of, that somebody carried in ballots 5 minutes after midnight. So this is not something I might be wrong, but this is something I never believed. But did they rig the game? Like when it comes to, how information was disseminated, which information was allowed? I'm sure that most remember when the Hunter Biden story was actively suppressed. Mm-hmm. We know now that a brother of Joe Biden is in very significant financial dealings with Qatar, right? So all these stories, they have been actively suppressed. I think NPR, which supposedly is, an objective public broadcaster, like they said they will not. What they sent out this tweet and said they will not bother their viewers and listeners with stories that are not real, that are irrelevant, which was the Hunter Biden story. So again, this was an active attempt to suppress or to deny like true information that would have been crucial. I mean, I want to know if the son of the president is taking bribes from foreign governments. I think that's a very relevant information. I mean, we were told in Trump's case that whatever Jared Kushner does is relevant, which I also think is relevant, but I think it's just as relevant in this case. And this is a real problem because they try to clamp down even more. And I'm sure, you have also followed the new head of NPR is basically a crazy woman. I can only to check out the work that Chris Rufo has been doing on her. I mean, this is like in a satirical play.
Yes. You're right about this. But I like your theory about how it hangs on Trump as a figurehead, because if they point out how other people lie, they can't have as much fun with Trump and they can't support an agenda. Because the media did have an appetite to question Obama and all of his wars on the Middle East, all the bloodshed he caused in Syria and other places, Somalia and those kind of things. At least the media was willing to ask questions. What's Obama doing there? They let him spin it that he's arming moderates, but it wasn't to call him an outright liar as fun as much as it was for Trump. So if we have these figureheads, these Boris Johnsons, these Donald Trumps, that we can say, well, they're blatant liars, the rest of them not so much, then it gives them a power that maybe we hadn't foreseen.
Oh, you're absolutely right. But even in the case of Barack Obama, who I still think would be a fantastic guy to have a beer with, but when it comes to the truth, I mean, he also had issues with it. I remember, I think he has written 3 books in his life, or 4, and all of them are biographies of himself. I mean, that's an intriguing business model.
Why do you want to have a beer with someone like that who's just going to talk about themselves?
Well, I just always find him, and I think I'm not the only one, I always find him likable, even though I find his time as president for the United States very problematic. I think he's a nicer guy than he was a president. But that being said,
if you were Syrian, you might not think that. I mean, the thing with I bought all of the stuff about the criticism of Obama was racism. I believed that for 8 years. But once he left and I studied his history of upping the drone wars in the Middle East and how hypocritical and deadly that was, I don't think I want any beers with Barack Obama.
Okay,
but you can have one,
enough.
and then you ask him about his murderous record, please.
But that being said, even he, in one of his biographies, I think he was writing that his uncle in Indonesia, I think it was also an uncle. I don't want to lie. But there was a story that he died as a resistance fighter against the Dutch, and then his biographer wrote, well, that story is not entirely true. He actually died because he fell off a chair when he was hanging up curtains. Or another story was about his white girlfriend while he was at Columbia, which then was known as a so-called composite girlfriend, when it turned out that woman never existed. But it was kind of what it would have been if he would have had a girlfriend. I mean, this is also how my dating life works, right? It's mostly imaginary girlfriends, but you can see, right? This was always just well, they say all these things. It's not really a lie. It's creative, and it's they are such, and there I agree with you. Right? It's just the argument is they are just such good guys in every respect that it's okay if they bend the truth. Whereas again, as I said, if Donald Trump made a joke, it was was the end of the world, and it's as you say, it's frustrating. Yeah.
There was a podcast recently with Jason Bateman and, who are the dudes? These 3 actors that did a podcast with, let's see, Obama, Biden, Bill Clinton.
Oh, yeah.
And who was Bush there? I think Bush was there. We'll put the image up on the screen. I think we have it. But that really upset me because they all are getting these coolness points and all 4 of them are murderers. And so they're like, hey, look at us Hollywood actors. We're going to talk about how we really love America and we do good things and we're better than most people. But they're murderers and they're liars. And they are given this status, celebrity status, that really just made me so sad. So if you are ever invited to something like that, you go. I'm not gonna. And you ask the questions, why are you guys liars and murderers?
In my defense, because at the same time when the event you allude to happened, right? I think Donald Trump was in New York at the wake of
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
a slain police officer, and I always find in these stories that Donald Trump is much more authentic and relatable than anybody else. I always find the obsession that particularly politicians on the left have with celebrities disgusting. I think we are supposed to be ruled by politicians and not by wannabe celebrities. And by the way, I always find this, as if I might say this a little bit in defense of Donald Trump, I find this so funny. He was a celebrity, but he doesn't necessarily seek out their attention. But I just recently, there was, I think it was Drew Barrymore, and I'm not sure in which movies he was after E.T., and that was almost 30 years ago. And she had Kamala Harris on, and she said to her, Kamala, you have to be, I think she said, Mamala Harris, because she must be the mother of the nation, which is, I find this idea that the president or the vice president has to be the mother of the nation, that is a personality cult. And Joe Biden was on with Howard Stern, and Howard Stern said, I'm so glad you're on with me because you are the father this nation needs. And I said, well, no, I know many Trump supporters. I don't know a single Trump supporter who ever said, man, Trump, that's the father of the nation. Nobody would ever say such a thing. It would be ridiculous, and it's just even more ridiculous for any other politician. That's a personality cult. The personality cult has always been on the left, and it has always been worse with the media. I remember one last example, actually two examples, if I may. One was he was David Brooks in the New York Times. And he said, well, you can tell that Obama will be a great president because the way his pants are perfectly greased, which, again, completely absurd. And the other one was Andrew Sullivan, whom I generally like very much, who said that, yes, when Obama becomes president, like this will be a massive shift in the world, because every person in Pakistan who sees that the United States made a person of color president, they will immediately switch their position and their opinion on the United States. And as you correctly pointed out, I don't think that the people who have been droned in Yemen care a lot whether or not the president who gave the order to send those drones is black or white. I think it's the drones that matter to them, not who sent them. But this is the absurdity you have so often in the media. They are the ones, I find this so interesting. They always accuse the right of a personality cult. They accuse the right of being susceptible to authoritarian figures, but it's exactly the other way around. Everything they claim about the other side is what they do themselves. It's really a mirror image. And as I said before, the same is true about the so-called threats to democracy. You have from the United States to Germany and in Austria as well, you have the governing parties try to weaponize the legal system against the opposition parties, because the opposition parties are supposedly a threat to democracy. But what they are doing is an actual threat to democracy. At the same with Donald Trump. If you look at the things that Joe Biden did, whether it's the number of executive orders or his insane plan to cram down mandatory vaccinations on 80 million Americans, but Donald Trump was the authoritarian. Like, this is, again, it's the complete opposite. And I think we need to point this out more and more, because I do know that many people, independents, low propensity voters, people are not immersed in these political debates. They just get the information from the surface. And then they say, well, both of them seem bad, but probably the guy the media says is worse is actually worse. And I think we have to push back against this as much as we can.
All right. Well, we're going to keep doing that. When we see lies, we're going to say those are lies. People can share it. I mean, little things we can do. Retweet it when you see that that's a lie. For example, the little things like that. Tell your friends when they share an article. These things are lies. These are the small ways that we can expand reason in our age of unreason. So thank you so much for all of this, Ralph. It was great to talk about liars and murderers, and we're going to do our best to make sure we live in a society without those people.
Thanks for having me, Natali. Anytime.
I really hoped you enjoyed watching this video. YouTube thinks that you'll actually like this next video right here. It's personalized based on your own viewing habits. So if you watch the video, please leave a comment. Let us know what you think about it. And we will see you next time, everyone.